Alright, hi and welcome back to another very exciting Android video tutorial. I'm your host, Matthias Reich, and today we'll take a look at something called intents. Now, to understand what intents are, let's talk about activities first. As you know, an activity is basically a screen in your application, and so far we've created applications that consisted only of one screen and thus one activity. Now, a real-world application usually consists of more than one screen. So, for example, an image viewer might have a screen for the actual image display and another screen where you can configure some options or something like that. So, in order to bring up a new screen, you simply have to start another activity. And you can do that with the help of intent objects. Now, an intent object is basically a small message object where you specify which activity you want to launch and where you can also specify the data you want to pass on to that activity. Now, the great thing about that is that you cannot only start activities that belong to your own application, but you can also launch activities that belong to different applications. For example, those built-in Android applications. And the benefit from that is that you don't have to recode things that already exist. So, for example, if you need to display a list of all your contacts, you can simply use that activity that is provided by Android rather than recoding all that stuff on your own. So that is really great and usually a really great time saver as well. So in this introduction, I'd like to show you how to launch activities that are provided by the actual Android system. Alright, so let's get started on that. So here I am in Eclipse, and as you can see, I've already created a project, and also I created a layout already. As you can see, very simple. Just 3 buttons inside our standard linear layout. And if I switch to that graphical view, you can see that it's really nothing fancy. You can see 3 buttons, so we want to bring up the contact list, we want to bring up that call log, and we want to see if we can launch the activity that handles the gallery. Alright? So let's get back to our Java source code here. And I want to come down here after set content view. And I want to start with the first button. So type button, call it, I don't know, button contact is equal to, cast that to a button, find view by ID, r.id dot button contacts, right? And then you need to import that. Now here's a handy shortcut. If you hold Control, Shift, and M, as you can see, it'll automatically add that to that import list, so you don't have to, hover over it and then, click import class. So it's much faster that way. All right. Next, I want to actually add an on-click listener. Right. So I said set on-click listener, and that is going to be a new on-click listener. Now, if you hold Control space, it'll give you a code hint, and I just hit enter, and then it automatically creates the whole method and everything. But I still need to import that, so Control Shift M, and now it asks me which class I want to import, and I want to import the first one because, as you might remember, that second one is used inside those alert dialogues, right? But since we're not in one of those dialogues, we'll take the first one and click OK or hit enter. Okay, so let's get into that method here. Now, if the user clicks on that button, I want to bring up the contact list, right? Just for viewing. You can't do anything on that list, like, selecting a contact or picking a contact. It's just for viewing purposes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a new intent object, and I'll call that I, or name that I, and it is equal to new intent, open parentheses, close parentheses. Now, same here, we need to import that, so Control Shift M. And now we have to specify which activity we want to actually launch. Now, there are two possibilities to do that. You can create an explicit intent, meaning that you specify exactly which activity you want to launch by providing the name and package of that activity, or you can file an implicit intent, meaning that you specify just an action and just the data set, and Android will look for an activity that can handle an action, or that specified action and the specified data. Alright, so for the sake of simplicity, we'll use an implicit intent, meaning that we have to set an action and a data, something that the activity can work on. Alright, so the first thing I want to specify is that action, so I type I dot set action. And I want to set that to action view, right? Because I just want to view the contact list. I don't want to edit that. I don't want to pick a contact. Just want to view it. Okay. Alright, so next I want to pass on some data to that activity. And since I want to display the contacts in my address book, I'm setting that data to the URI of that database table where all my contacts are stored. Alright, so I type I dot set data. And as you can see, it expects an URI, and I want to type Android dot provider dot contacts dot people dot content URI. Now, if you've never worked with databases in Android before, this line of code is probably a bit hard to understand for you. Now, if you don't understand what's behind all this, that's completely fine by now. You don't have to. What you have to know, though, is that this parameter is just sort of a link to the place where all my contact data is stored, right? It's just the address of the database table where all the contacts in my phone book are stored. So that's the important thing. And what Android does when you start an activity with that intent, it just looks for an activity that can handle a view action on that data we provided down here. All right. So in the next line, we'll actually start our activity. So we type start activity, and it expects an intent, and so we just pass on our intent I. All right. And now we save it. Now let's just run that application now to see what we've got so far. So run as an Android application. Alright, so here we are in our emulator, in our little application. As you can see, 3 buttons, those lower 2 doesn't work. So if we click on View Contacts, as you can see, it now displays our contact list here, right? I have 4 contacts, Andrew, Jessica, Peter, and Zoe. And yeah, we can, view them like this. And if you click on that back arrow here, you can see we're taken back to our application. Alright, so that's working, and now let's create the logic for the remaining 2 buttons. Alright, back in Eclipse. Now I could type that all again for the other 2 buttons, but instead of retyping it, I'm just selecting that. Hit Control C for copy, and then I'll paste it in, Control V 2 times, and then I just rename those variables here. Call log, and let's see that this button call log, and I want to rename that one to button gallery, and that one is button gallery. Alright. So now in this onClick method, or with this button, we actually want to display the call log. So the first thing I want to do is I want to delete the line with the setData method, since we don't need it to display the call log. And I also want to change our action, and what I want to choose is action call button, right? And oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to change it here, and that should also be button gallery. So back to our call log button here. Believe it or not, but that is pretty much everything we need to do to display our call log, right? So let's save our file and rerun that application. Alright, so here we are back in our emulator, and as you can see, when I click on that View Call Log button, it actually starts up our call log. As you can see, I called Peter 2 days ago and Jessica also 2 days ago. So when I press that back button, it'll take me back to my application like it did when we were in that contact list. You can still click that, of course, and it takes you back and so forth. Alright, so one more to go. Let's implement the logic for that View Gallery button, right? So let's get back to our Eclipse here. Come into that last onClick method down here. With this button, we actually want to display our gallery, right? Our pictures in our gallery. So the action for that is actually action view. So we can leave it at that. And for the data, we need to change that URI. So we want to change it to android.provider.images.media.internal content URI. Okay, so we'll save that and run that application again. Okay, so here we are again in our emulator, and now when we click that View Gallery button, you can see it takes us to our gallery, right? I have 4 sample images in there, like a horse. You can watch that here. Go back, watch that fancy tree here, Go back, and if you go back, you're back at the application. Now you might wonder how you're supposed to know what to put in those set action and set data methods in here. Well, I can only advise you to browse the API documentation. It's all written in there somewhere. I know it can be a bit confusing sometimes because it's such a vast amount of information, but if you'll have a good look and you know what you want and you know what you're looking for, you should definitely find it in there. And another great way of determining which values you have to insert into those methods is by using the debug monitor. So to do that, you want to actually open a new terminal window and then type ddms. And please make sure that you have an emulator, an instance of that emulator running in the background, because otherwise this won't work. All right. So type ddms and hit enter. And that will fire up the debug monitor. We will talk about this little helpful application in a future episode. The important thing for our purpose today is this area down here. That's the log window. And if you open up your emulator and, for example, you want to know which intent you have to use for that gallery, you would open up your gallery and then click on all pictures here. And when you switch back to your debug monitor, you can actually see a whole bunch of debug and log messages here. And in this line here, you can see that when we started our gallery and selected all pictures, it started an activity, and the intent for that activity used the view action, and as a data source, it used that content URI we specified through that through this line here. Right? It's the internal content URI. So this is a great way of figuring out what's happening behind the scenes, which activities are started when you do this or that. And it could be really helpful if you don't know what to enter into those methods, right? So I know this tutorial could be a bit intimidating at first, because it's a whole lot of new stuff. It's a bit complicated and a bit overwhelming at first, maybe. Rest assured that we will talk about intents and deal with intents in future tutorials, so you'll hear a lot more about them and how to use them. And we will also talk about databases and all that stuff like content providers. And once you understand those, you will also understand the parameter that we inserted into that set data method. All right, so don't give up. I know it's a bit hard to understand at first, especially if you never heard of anything like that. But keep watching these tutorials, keep practicing, and we'll get there. So I hope you found this tutorial useful and you're eager to learn more about intents and activities and all that good stuff. Stay tuned for the next tutorial. And if you have any suggestions or questions, as usual, feel free to comment on the blog at www.extensivearts.com. And happy coding, and I'll see you next time.